The Beatrice Wood Center for the Arts cares for the legacy of Beatrice Wood, sharing her artwork, folk art collection, library, studio, and home, as well as historical photos and memorabilia. As Beatrice Wood's life was intertwined with other important artists and the Happy Valley Foundation, we also share these relationships. The center also presents exhibitions of contemporary art, workshops, and performances, balancing legacy and continuum with our programming. Ultimately, as Beatrice Wood led an inspiring life, we are committed to inspiring individuals to similarly lead lives where inspiration and discipline are balanced and everyday life is infused with art. For this reason, our motto is, Life is an Art. Beatrice Wood lived to the age of 105 and became increasingly successful and well-known through her 80s and 90s. For this reason, the image most people have of Beatrice Wood is that of an elderly woman, and photographers love taking photos of her draped in her jewelry with her Indian saris, and that's for the most part the Beatrice Wood people know. Beatrice Wood did not see herself in those last few decades as an elderly woman. In fact, she claimed to be 32 years of age right up to the end, and her drawings revealed that she saw herself as a beautiful young woman, and indeed she was a romantic who didn't hesitate to flirt with any attractive man who came to visit. I've heard it repeatedly from men that, when engaged in conversation with her, found that the idea that she was elderly just faded away. This is why I wanted to share this photo, so that you can all see the inner Beatrice. The best shorthand way to understand the character of Beatrice Wood is to know that she was the inspiration for the character of Rose in the movie Titanic. This fictional character captured Wood's rebellious and romantic spirit, and the relationship she had with her mother, who wanted her to behave in the proper manner of high society and to marry a wealthy man. Beatrice chose not to have the traditional debutante party, where a woman's coming of age is celebrated and the wealthy sons of friends are invited to come and court her. Instead, she wanted to go to art school, and her mother relented and sent her to a fashionable art school in Giverny, where Monet was living at the time. Beatrice was sent there with a governess, who she referred to as a mean old woman of 30. She found the school tediously academic, ran away, and installed herself in an attic studio that could only be accessed by a ladder. Her mother found her and took her back to Paris, Beatrice's dream of being an artist seemingly at an end. Beatrice then somehow convinced her mother that she should instead study acting, and she was sent to the Comédie Française. Founded in 1680, it is today the oldest active theater company in the world. Beatrice studied acting and learned to act in French. World War I came along then, and everyone got out of Paris. Beatrice's family summered there, and they came back to New York City. But then, all of the artists, writers, and intellectuals went mainly to either Zurich or the United States. When many leading Paris artists arrived in New York City, Beatrice Wood, who was fluent in French, was introduced to them. Among the artists she met was Marcel Duchamp, who she considered the most handsome, charming, intelligent man in the whole world. Duchamp introduced her to Louis and Walter Arensberg, who were modern art collectors and held regular salons in their home. Her first reaction was that modern art was nonsense. She had studied art, and this was not art. Duchamp challenged her, saying, "If you think it's so easy, let's see you do it." She produced a drawing designed to make fun of it all, and Duchamp had it published in a magazine. He gave her the keys to his studio and tutored her, with the intention of teaching her that there is no correct way to create art, and that it's not about technique, but about what comes from the unconscious mind. It was a way of thinking that would return to her decades later when she took up ceramics. Beatrice Wood became part of the Dada movement, which had started in Zurich, and she worked alongside Duchamp, Picabia, and other leading avant-garde artists of the time. Dada was essentially a reaction to the war. With the belief that everything that came before had led to this horrible war, the Dadaists sought to create new approaches to everything: painting, sculpture, poetry, dance, theater, literature. They were against defining Dada, so there were phrases used such as Dada is everything, Dada is nothing, and Dada is anti-Dada. Ultimately, it took decades for art historians to understand the major impact that Dada had on contemporary art, as it seemed like such a crazy art movement. When World War I ended, all of the European artists went back home, and Beatrice Wood went from being part of this wonderful world of avant-garde artists to being alone. She continued to act on the stage as part of the French Repertory Theater and to paint. She worked at Sunwise Turn, a bookstore frequented by leading writers of the time. The bookstore also exhibited art, and Peggy Guggenheim, who interned at the bookstore in the 1920s, credited it with spurring her love of collecting. Wood's mother was, of course, still trying to control her life and make her into something else, but Beatrice was working to find her own way in the world. Beatrice Wood lived in a world of actors, writers, and artists, and she knew that that was where she belonged. She just had to figure out how to make a living in order to have her independence. Beatrice Wood fell in love with a handsome and eccentric director, playwright, and actor named Reginald Pole, and he introduced her to Theosophy, at the time a Victorian spiritualist movement, and the writings of Annie Besant and the teachings of Krishnamurti. It was during this period of time that she met Rosalind Williams Rajagopal, who would become a close friend. Beatrice and Reginald went to a spiritualist bookstore and she purchased 2 books by Annie Besant and C.W. Leadbeater. One of these was Thought Forms. Leadbeater was a noted clairvoyant and the book shared his methods. Essentially, the idea is that all thoughts take form and a clairvoyant can see these forms and read them based upon their color, shape, definition, etc. The book was first published in 1905 and influenced a number of modern artists, including Kandinsky, Mondrian, and Klee. In the front of the book, there's a guide to the colors, sharing the meaning of each with the idea that all color has a vibration. Beatrice Wood's life shifted with the introduction to Theosophy, and it influenced her approach to art and theater. The impact of the East, particularly the spiritual traditions of India, influenced what people read, how they meditated, what they discussed, and how they dressed. She would go to hear Annie Besant speak and was introduced to J. Krishnamurti. Beatrice Wood was impressed with Rosalind Williams Rajagopal from the day they met, and they became close friends. The two decided to become fashion designers and start a company together, but in 1931 Rosalind had a daughter named Radha, and those plans fell by the wayside. In 1926, Beatrice Wood first came to Ojai, where Krishnamurti was speaking, and she fell in love with the place. She couldn't figure out how to live in Ojai, but as her friends the Ahrensbergs had moved to Hollywood, she moved to Los Angeles. Beatrice had purchased a set of luster-glazed ceramic plates in Holland, where she went to hear Krishnamurti speak at a castle he'd been given there. She wanted to create a matching teapot and took an adult education class at Hollywood High School. She fell in love with working in clay and soon was studying with various ceramicists. She felt that ceramics were the thing that would finally allow her to financially support herself. Beatrice took the study of ceramics very seriously, as well as marketing. Soon she was selling work to department stores and was featured in museum exhibitions. In 1946, Beatrice Wood purchased a lot across the street from where Rosalind and Krishnamurti were living on McAndrew Road in Lower Ojai, and she built a modest house and studio there. Rosalind convinced Beatrice to teach ceramics at the Happy Valley School, where she was already teaching folk dancing. When Beatrice was invited to India for a touring exhibition and a series of lectures, it changed her life. She fell in love with India, and her life was never the same. With the decision to build the school in Happy Valley in the early 1970s, Rosalind decided to build her house on the hill overlooking the school and invited Beatrice to build her home next door. Annie Besant's 1927 appeal for funds and press release shared plans for a school, art center, and more in Happy Valley, and Rosalind saw Beatrice building her home there to be the next step in manifesting Besant's vision. Beatrice Wood was 80 years of age by the time she moved into her new home in Happy Valley, but was not yet famous enough to warrant an art center with her name on it, so she thought for a while that it would be a folk art museum and pursued her collecting with this idea in mind. Of course, once Beatrice Wood was living in Happy Valley, a period of time that she describes as the happiest in her life, she became increasingly well known, and now people come from all around the world to see her home and studio. One of the forms Beatrice Wood loved to create was the chalice. When combined with her transcendent luster glazes, these works are suggestive of the Holy Grail. Beatrice continued to create sculptural works, many influenced by folk art from around the world. Having learned the technical aspects of being a potter, working with clay and creating glazes, the teachings of Duchamp came into play, and she became increasingly freer in her explorations. She loved to shock people, a true Dadaist, and she loved to laugh. This is reflected in many of her works in ceramic and on paper. While people often refer to Beatrice Wood as a potter, it's not really a fitting description, as she was an artist who explored pottery, created sculpture, and continued to create two-dimensional works throughout her life. Much of her work concerns the relationship between men and women, which she felt was fraught with challenges due to the differences between them. Over the years, I have found that Beatrice Wood has inspired countless people, many who went on to become successful artists, writers, filmmakers, dancers, and actors, though her influence is certainly not limited to those engaged in creative pursuits. She was very wise, having studied world religions and philosophy, yet it all seemed to somehow make her lighter and quicker to laugh. She didn't like to proselytize, and those who came to visit her rarely found themselves in deep conversations regarding spiritual matters, though she didn't hesitate to discuss her concerns for humanity and the madness of war. Occasionally, if you asked the right question, or if she saw something in you, she'd delve a little more deeply and offer advice. I've met numerous people who credit her with being the one who advised them to follow their dreams, whether that meant going back to university or pursuing their creative work. The one thing I can guarantee that she shared with them, however, was the importance of discipline and doing the work. As she once explained it, everybody wants freedom. We resent rules imposed from the outside, which can create chaos for the individual. But self-discipline is vital. We get nowhere without it.